as they fired or rather let go about 1,000 people yesterday. So NOAA might start to be showing signs of problems with their website, with their databases. Let's hope this isn't going to happen because the world depends on NOAA's satellite data.
Yeah.
Our I think we operate like 6,000 stations, or we certify about 6,000 terrestrial stations worldwide. NOAA is the main source uh, for global ice data on ice width, ice area. It is the global benchmark for. I think we have something like 400 uh, stations worldwide that are looking at CO2, carbon, CO2, CH4, N2O, SF6, all of the Montreal gases, all of the halogens, all of the bromines are measured in, depending on, not all of them do all 400, but yes, there's hundreds of stations that are doing dozens of different gases, and we rely on that information on global climate, and not just climate, but because there are things that the halogens they have a. I'm not going to say they don't have a climate effect. The halogens do have a climate effect, but it's more of what they do to us in terms of damage to the ozone layer. So not only are they greenhouse gases and significant greenhouse gases, they are also ozone deozonators. Oh, trying to figure out ozone killers. So until I get a better name for it.
That's a new term, the ozonators. I like that.
Well, ozone.
Sal, do they? Oh,
Uh,
I was just wondering if you knew like the details of the layoffs. Like, is it
oh,
like kind of is it across the
it's
board,
it
feet on the
it is it
ground,
is
all
it
over the
is
place?
everybody who was hired within the last 2 years. And as anybody who knows me and my and the work that I do here, and I just I'm a conglomerator. One of my favorite NOAA scientists was Zach LeBay, and I followed his career when he was a grad student. He is now was hired by NOAA about a year ago. He is one of the best scientists in the field working on the cryosphere, and the cryosphere is part of today's topic. Ice is the cryosphere. That's North Pole ice, South Pole ice, glacial ice. These are his specialty. And about seven something Eastern time last night, he announced it. That yeah, he's been fired. And this kid is the top of the top. I know I'm calling him a kid because he is. To me, he's a kid. But it's so sad to see such a great scientist, a boots on the ground scientist. He's not just somebody who does reporting. He's not a desk jockey by any stretch of the imagination. He is a field scientist, and to lose people like him, it's terrible. It's uh, your nation's entire scientific structure depends upon having qualified people in the field doing work. If you start firing people who are in the field doing work, you will start to have a decline in the quality of the information that
talking to the public about the data and the levels of collapse that we see playing out by the second and the day. It is still not happening. And that's why I continue to push on that. And I will continue to push as hard as I possibly can do, day in, day out, as you all probably know, I would do anyway, in the name of getting that education across, and in the name of finally getting all governmental administrations across the entire planet to finally face up to what responsibility to talking about the climate emergency truly means towards the public. Because at the moment, they're still continuing to get away with silence because they are wired up and geared by the puppeteer oligarchs and billionaires within the respective media journalistic institutions who are continuing to stop governmental administrations and their prime ministers and their presidents. They're actively blocking those PMs and those presidents from giving scientific data bulletins to the public at all.
How they said that we had 2,000 ppm CO2 and the world was fine. And I said, no, we didn't, because the last time we had 2,000 ppm was the PETM, which was about 59 million years ago, and global temperatures were about 16 degrees Celsius. Global average temperatures were 16 degrees hotter than they are now. Now, could you imagine adding 16 degrees Celsius to the current global temperature? What that would do to this planet?
Mm,
You would turn almost every stretch of the tropics into a desert. Yeah,
absolutely.
we were talking about it.
But
Yeah.
Yes.
um, you know, I hear people saying that. And one thing that strikes me when I hear that is, first of all, what were the number of human
Well,
beings on
yeah,
the planet,
net zero.
right? How many trees were there? Like it's kind of comparing apples to oranges. It just doesn't make
Mm,
sense because we're not. That's not taking into account all the
mm,
ecosystems that are feeding and regulating and stabilizing
absolutely.
climate and
Yeah.
interacting
Mm,
with it.
There is a data point that it's the kind of thing that is absolutely shocking. But if you count only, now we don't know obviously all about ocean biomass, and we don't know everything about subsurface biomass. And for all we know, there is as much, if not more, subsurface biomass generated every year than surface biomass, because we just don't know what's going on underneath our feet. That said, human beings take up 55% of global annual biomass for our own purposes and for the purposes of our livestock and our everything else that we carry along with us. So how long can this planet keep going as we take 55% of everything for ourselves? It's obviously going
Well,
to continue to
yeah,
there's less and less of the rest of the planet, of all of the life on the planet.
absolutely. And that's one of the key premises of someone whose work we're going to look at today, which is Dr. William Rees. He talks about, our fundamental problem is ecological overshoot. The climate crisis is sort of a cover for the ecological overshoot that's happening, right? We keep on thinking if we solve the climate crisis, everything will be fine, but we're still destroying the environment, even with our climate crisis solutions.
The problem, yes, it's we have to we have to continue to innovate. We have to continue switching over from, oh great, more rounds of layoffs coming in today. We have to continue to change our primary focus in terms of what we are utilizing, from that which is biological to that, and paleo life, which after all, uh, fossil fuels are former life. It's not current life, but it's life that used to be. We have to stop uh, exploiting life that used to be, and we have to start exploiting the sun, uh, wind, which is essentially also solar power, tides, which is partially solar power and partially gravity. We have to go away from using non-renewable sources of energy, simply because even though this is a spectacularly huge planet, all of those are finite and limited. And for, as long as for the next billion plus years, as long as life is going to still stay on the Earth's surface, yeah, the sun is for all practical purposes, infinite. We may one day, 1,000 years from now, have a society that uses so much energy that we actually need more than the light that's coming down on Earth. And then we're just going to build ourselves a Dyson sphere around the entire sun. But we have to switch away from these non-renewable sources, obviously, because we cannot just keep on withdrawing from the bank without putting in deposits.
I mean, that might be where the solution lies. But there is also this theory that humans will always consume beyond the availability of the resources, and that we through technology we make the resources accessible. um, an example of this is our idea of what peak oil is. Like, many times in the last 100 years we've talked about that we're going to reach peak oil. We
But
had the energy crisis of the 1970s.
yeah, yes, but
um,
okay. I, let's go into both of those. First things, you mentioned without saying it by name, Jevons paradox. That is,
yes.
the more you use, the more you will use. And the fact of the matter is, if we take a look at the LED lighting, LED lighting is about 12 times more lights, more lumens of light per watt of energy than the old incandescent bulbs are. But we don't have lights on in our houses 24/7 all of the time, to scorch levels, even though lighting is using up so much fewer resources than it did in the past. Because Javon's paradox, I think the flaw with it is you're still paying. You're not getting it for free. So perhaps if something was for free, Javon's paradox might have some value. And then the second part of it is there still are practical limitations. I mean, after all, the air is free. we have an unlimited amount of air. So we don't have 14 lungs. We're not breathing constantly. We're not using more and more and more of it constantly. There are practical limits to how much you want and how much you can use. And that's why I have a problem with Javon's paradox, because it doesn't exactly describe an economic reality. Yes, we will use more, but that doesn't mean it's infinite. It means it's asymptotic. So it may be much twice as much as we currently use, but it doesn't mean it's going to be an endless. Which is why I do not like Javon's paradox at all, because it doesn't. It the asymptotic level isn't infinity. It's the realistic level which we can we need something at. And peak oil, peak oil is peak oil based on our ability to generate it at that time. So as you drill more and more oil out, actually, you don't, as you draw more oil out of the ground, as you pump more oil out of the ground, you have to have better drilling equipment, or else the stuff that's easily available is soon depleted. And that's what we've done. We have not just fracking, which is really critical, hydraulic fracturing, which is essentially you use compressed fluids to crack holes inside the crust. So you may drill in one area, but then once you put the hydraulic fluid into the crust area near the drill, you are now creating a hole that is essentially miles large, as opposed to just being a foot in diameter. So the reason why we don't have quote unquote peak oil anymore is we found ways to extract more oil. So the peak is the peak of your ability to extract it with the technology you have available, with the amount you can reach. So we keep on extending peak oil, but eventually, yeah, there is going to be a peak because it is not renewable. So we will find a way to draw more and more oil out of the most marginal of resources, and eventually getting that next barrel will be much more complicated, much more difficult. All right, I'm sorry. I wanted to
No, no, no.
extend
Well,
upon and
well, to add to that, I mean, so it's the technology that allowed us to, I guess, retrieve
yes,
the gas through fracking that wasn't
yes,
economically and also physically feasible prior. But as we're doing that, we're leading to more
of
environmental
course.
degradation, and also eventually we will use up those supplies as well. Um, One of the shocking, what I found was shocking stats that came out in the recent days, and I don't know if I have a reference for it right now, but I could get it. Is that this new type of oil, or gas through fracking and non-conventional oil sources, are the predominant new form of energy on the planet Earth right now, outpacing renewable energy production.
Let, I wanted to.
I could
Yeah,
find
yeah,
the
no, no.
I could find the graph for it.
What I wanted to say, this is kind of funny. I'm sorry, but do you know what you're getting out of the ground in Canada, in the Alberta oil shale? Do you know what that really is? It's
Um,
it,
Bitumen,
well,
bitumen.
it's not crude oil. It is synthetic
It's tar
tar
sands.
sands. It is synthetic
Right.
crude oil. So what they're doing is they are retorting it. Retorting is a fancy name for boiling the crap out of. They are boiling these tar sands in water, and they are pulling out the hydrocarbons from that slurry, and they are creating a synthetic crude oil. So natural crude oil has peaked a long time ago. Now we're pulling it, we are creating it out of these dirty sands. So yes, we still have more, but it's because we're redefining. That's why we no. This is this is classified as a synthetic oil, even though if you go to the marketplace and buy it, you don't you know they're not calling this number one sweet crude synthetic. It's just Canadian Canadian crude oil. Names are important. I'm sorry if that killed everything. But I'm looking for data to post up on the board. I
Oh, Sal,
yes,
I was just going to say related to that is this idea. I mean, do we want to get more into the psychology right now?
sure.
Um,
That's
because okay, yeah, let me well, I did prepare something. I'll try not to read it, but that's my habit. Um, I posted up in the little pill up there, whatever people call it, is a video, a link to a video with Dr. William Reese speaking and talking about our obsolescent brain. He looks at it through I guess the different. I probably won't get into it that much today because I was just going to talk more about his arguments and theories about how our brain basically can't handle the current crises that we're in. But he looks at like the economics, climate change, and overshoot. He's a fantastic mind thinker. He's a former director and professor from the University of British Columbia's School of Planning in Vancouver. He's best known as the originator and co-developer of ecological footprint analysis, which I think about maybe 6 to 8 months ago, Sal, we had a workshop on that about how it's calculated and exactly what it means and everything like that. So and just to listen to him speak, I highly recommend the video because he pulls in. I mean, he doesn't just say, "I think," you know, uh, that we aren't capable of handling complex crises. He explains why, and he draws on a wealth of material and research, which it just makes it so fascinating. So he's really trying to bring the different disciplines together in hopes that we could all better understand how the human mind works. So we will have some hope and space to change things. But yeah, he well, I mean, last week we started with this talk, and we looked at the Yale's program for climate change communication and their latest survey on climate change in the American mind, which provided data and told us that the vast majority of Americans know that the climate crisis is human caused. The majority of Americans worry about how it will affect their lives. Um, but, however, um, these beliefs don't translate into pro climate behavior. Over 60% of respondents do not talk about climate change to their family and friends. Some of the reasons for this include, I think a big part of it is the successful corporate propaganda campaign about the climate crisis and climate crisis solutions, our deeply seated beliefs about the functioning of human society and our role in it, and how humans protect themselves from pain by disavowing the climate crisis. Um, and, I would say that to fix our natural world, we have to understand our feelings and understand how the human mind operates. Then there's also the field of climate communication, which has looked at how people are motivated to act on climate change. And the results from this field has been largely conflicting and inconclusive because it seems like both stories of hope and also fear have failed to alter people's behavior in regards to climate change. So enter the concept of the obsolescent brain by Dr. William Rees. He argues that modern humans living in the modern techno industrial society have not evolved beyond the cognitive limits set by their Paleolithic brains. We don't realize that we're trapped in a Darwinian sinkhole. And this ultimately means that we're maladapted to solve the ecological and climate crises. Uh, any comments thus far? I mean, some people might find this hard to swallow. We're not perfect, and one of the he's very smart. He says that there's many lenses that we can look at this through, and he chooses to analyze our problems with two different lenses, and one of them is this idea that humans are exceptional, that man can conquer nature, that man can transcend nature, that man can exploit nature, that we can dominate nature, but we can also enjoy it and appreciate it and study it. It's this idea, it emerged out of the Enlightenment and is closely tied to religious beliefs, Judeo Christian ethics. There's a belief that we are morally superior and that as human beings, we stand uniquely apart from the natural world. This also means that we're exempt from the biophysical laws of the planet and that evolutionary history and humanity's genetic endowment have virtually no bearing on how the future unfolds. Our human motivations and behaviors are wholly determined by social and cultural factors. And this itself is deeply tied to our conceptions of neoliberalism and how society functions. The
Oh,
other
sorry.
lens, okay,
No.
I was just
I,
going to say
there are several different aspects to why people do not, quote unquote, get it, and um, again, I don't know how far we want to go into today into this part of it, but as you said, it is the obsoleteness of our brains. Some of it is religion, some of it is um, tribalism, some of it is political. We don't want to know what we don't know.
right, and he does uh, go into great detail about why that's so. Um, he provides a lot of evidence. Um, but I'll just say the other lens of which he views it, and this is the side that he's on, and that the side that seems to make most sense to me is the idea that humans are a part of nature, and he he follows the work of, I love this name, Theodosius Dobzhansky. And Dobzhansky is quoted as saying, "Nothing in biology makes sense except in light of evolution." Humans, like all species, are a product of evolution by natural selection. And Dr. Rees proposes it follows that nothing in human affairs makes sense except in light of evolution. So and then tied to this is this idea that in the modern techno industrial society, we perceive our eco-social crisis through the lens of human exceptionalism, and this is an error. Because of this, we misunderstand humanity's predicament, and we cannot solve the problem. And then he goes on to explain how humans are a product of natural selection, and that natural selection requires we have to have large populations to have variation in the structure and function of key heritable features. Some variations will be better adapted to prevailing environmental conditions. Individual with superior variations will be selected by the environment, i.e., they will survive and produce more offspring, and that the responsible genes will accumulate in subsequent generations. The implications of this is of natural selection is that our brain has evolved in the same manner as other organs and attributes. And the capabilities of the brain reflect the environments which it has evolved in. This is important because our brain evolved in an environment vastly different from the environment we find ourselves in now. And also, he says that we're still progressing, we're still evolving, and we're still right now subject to natural selection.
There is something fascinating about how in the last, let's say, 400 years, that's I guess the best general. Deirdre, I'm sorry, I didn't see your hand up.
Yeah, I
What's give me five.
yeah, sure, that sounds good.
Technology has changed evolution. I don't know how many of you people are wearing glasses. I'm wearing glasses right now. What would my life expectancy been if I didn't have these eyeglasses that prevent me from getting accidentally eaten by a saber-toothed tiger because I wouldn't have been able to see it in the distance? How many of our lives? So essentially, technology has changed our um, evolution, has softened up the species. So now that could mean two things. Yes, we're no longer survival of the physically fittest. We might now be survival of the more intellectually fit. Although it's hard to make that it's hard to make that argument right now.
I don't know.
So yeah, the evolutionary argument is very, very strange. Sorry, Deirdre. Deirdre, yep. All right, so I'll
Just a
continue until
sec.
she's ready. Oh, sorry. I
Yeah,
know
so
that's the
I
problem
was
with
wanting to read from there's a paper I ran across that
bandwidth issues.
I, I think she might have some issues there. I can't hear her.
Because what I was saying, I like to think that because physical capabilities are no longer defining whether or not we survive past the age of 18, that maybe the next step is, our intellectual aspects are progressing forward, or maybe the capabilities that we have as for other trades, arts, music, composition might be advanced. Someone who now has the ability to make a living by by being in the arts and is helping human culture. So maybe that's advancing our society. I see Deirdre's coming back in. Yes, Robert.
Yeah, thanks, Sal. It's this business that I just want to go over again about how many Americans are at this present moment um, actually worrying about climate change. And I just want to expand on that briefly, if I can. And
Briefly.
yeah, sorry, Sal, you're going to say something. I'm
No,
sorry.
just briefly, because Deirdre's in the wings.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah. I was just going to replicate that out, in fact, of the percentages that can be talked about across our planet, from country to country, if I can put it like that, about how many people are still wanting to talk about climate change, don't even think about talking about climate change, are sort of undecided in their minds about maybe I will talk about climate change or maybe I won't talk about it. And then there's those that are so terrified of the CC initials that to even think about talking about it will bring them out in a rather large rash that they'd rather avoid at any costs. So we do have all these different extensions if I can put it like this, that are from severity to not so severe, you know, mindsets, because that's what it comes down to, doesn't it, when we start talking about percentages of the public and their perception of danger, their perception of climate change, their perception of reality, or their perception of delusionment. And this is one of the major stumbling blocks that I continue to face every day on X in the course of my work. Major delusionment fatigue, or should I say major delusionment inability to accept reality. Because what seems to me to be the classic case over and over again is the inability of mindsets, no matter what the background, no matter what the country, to actually want to live in the reality of a situation rather than persist in dwelling in the fantasy of the situation. But I mean, this is understandable when we have a media that's living in fantasy over climate collapse. We have our governments living in fantasy over climate collapse. We even have our leaders so delusional that they're living in fantasy over climate collapse. All these guys really do seriously believe that climate collapse can just be conveniently brushed under the carpet for another 40 or 50 years and nothing whatsoever is going to have the remotest bit of change. How deluded can you get, and how wrong all these people fundamentally are? But talking about percentages briefly, because I know Pop's got his hand up, I do want to say that this percentage of Americans, if we can stick to the American percentages, I think, just for sake of what we're actually discussing here for a second, I do think that there needs to be an enlightenment. Of course, it's not going to come under the likes of a Trump administration. But I will say that if Americans want to actually get real, they need to be having proper conversations with their children at all levels. I've said long ago that, do you realize if 50 years ago, if we had climate education in schools, how much could have been advanced in mindsets of parents that have now had children that are in total delusionment over anything wrong? You know, just imagine all those parents that are now grown up, all those children that have, or should I say, that have turned into parents that have now had children. Just imagine all those minds that could have been actually given an accomplishment of understanding the rudimentary, you know, fundamentals of what climate collapse is, what it means, and what it's going to do to you at any given level. We would have had a lot of American individuals empowered in their minds about
I,
the extent of the crisis. Sorry, were you going to say something then, Sal? I wasn't thinking.
I'm just going to be very, very brief about that. Then Deirdre, then Pup. But the United States has had a spectacular amount of science literacy over the last
Sure.
few
Yeah. Yeah.
generations, and I don't. I think this is willingness, that it is certain parts of our society do not want science literacy because it goes
Sure.
against their philosophy or their religion.
Absolutely, Sal. Yeah, I will be very brief, Sal, because Deirdre and Pup have got their hand up, so I intend
Yes,
to wind this up within a minute, my friend. If you spare me the mic for a minute, I'll
sure.
finish. All I was going to say was that indeed so, that we have to entwine the fundamentals here of what you've just said within what we're talking about. We have to understand the implications, and we have to understand the constraints of what continues to go on. There is that issue, there's no doubt about it. But I will say this in regards to what you just mentioned, Sal, unless we're able to fundamentally shift our minds, not least within the US, on such ways of thinking at the moment, it will fundamentally give us, how can I put this? It is in our interest to do so urgently, to be able to change those mindsets from that particular state that we now find that so many still find ourselves in. So anyway, microphone handed over. I'm not sure to Pup or Deirdre, Sal, but that's me done for a bit
Deirdre,
anyway.
let's give it to Deirdre. And Pup,
Sorry
you
about
can
that.
usually.
Just as I got the microphone, my cell phone died. So here I am back again. I wanted to, I ran across a paper by Clark et al., Tribalism is Human Nature. And they wrote about, tribalism or in-group bias. And they said, our guiding assumption then is that tribal bias is a nearly ineradicable element of human nature, and it causes predictable cognitive biases, those that benefit the self and the group. And, this is a really fundamental part of how we're wired. And one of the things that happened, I read this, and one of the things that happened is social media people started realizing they could weaponize tribal bias through social media, that they could shape, there's negative outgroup perceptions, and they could shape those. Conservatives have been doing it for a long time, but social media made it a lot easier. For example, the whole Haitians eating pets narrative. And there's, climate denialism is a commonly held tribal bias on the right, unfortunately. And you can see it actually starting to contaminate people like Elon Musk. And, he believed in climate change, fairly recently. And I think it's not just that he lost his principles in search of power, but I think it's generally become, you can see his whole belief system shifting as he started associating himself with the right. And it's a huge issue, but you can see this whole pattern in how, these biases are formed. They're commonly held beliefs. There is a whole bunch of literature on political polarization, and they found that affective or emotional polarization is really hard to affect positively. If it's cognitive polarization, it's somewhat easier, and you can reason with the person. And so I just see we have, a huge problem in society in that these tribal biases in the emergence of authoritarianism in the US, and was really tied to that, in that, it was like, there's these, subhuman immigrants who were, raping your daughters and eating your pets, and we're going to get rid of them for you and save you. And and same thing, as they're turning tribalism against scientists too. You could see that. So it's just, I think, something to be conscious of, but the way in which it operates in our society, I think, has fundamentally changed, because it's now a lot more information is being propagated through tribal networks, because social media groups people through those networks. So those networks are, those channels are much larger, those networks are larger, and information propagates in them much more faster than it used to. So anyway.
Pop, good morning. Or yes, yes, good morning.
Yeah, I'm still I just finished cup one, so fair warning, I may be a tad incoherent. Yeah, the reason I think that the majority, I'm speaking about America here because I don't have a lot of exposure in Europe or other parts of the planet, but with regards to America, um, uh, science is complicated. Climate change is probably, next to nuclear physics, quantum mechanics, large data models, is probably one of the most complicated equations, humans have ever tried to put their finger on. And let's be perfectly blunt: the average American, isn't the brightest bulb in the box. Um, you complicate that with their time is limited. And an example of that is most of America hit with a $400 charge or unexpected expense can't cover it. And that means that they are working literally paycheck to paycheck. That doesn't leave any time or very little time to think about bigger, more complicated issues. Um, and then you add in a little bit of uh, 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 inappropriate. I deserve to be happy. And if the average American does have some time, then they go, well, do I want to think about complicated things that I really don't understand and don't have the brain power to handle, or do I want to go have a beer and watch a football game? Fuck it, it's the beer and football game. This then causes a reversion to lower levels of thinking in the brain. And I commonly refer to it with a really bastardized term called the lizard brain. It's where the flight, fight, fuck, and eat response comes from. That is in effect an emotional response. It's not a logical response. It's not a thinking response. It's a holy shit, a saber-toothed tiger's about to eat me. What do I do? Response. Um, and lots of times you think saber-toothed tiger standing there, I'll fight the fucker, and that's a losing decision. So it is not a thinking method that is produces reliable results. Um, and the other thing that then indicates is a severe lack of critical thinking skills. When you're posed with a problem or an issue, do you think about it critically, or do you just let your emotions run wild and get into groupthink and blah blah blah? And Deirdre was talking about you know, uh, uh, social groupings, and man is a social animal. He wants to go with the flow because that's comfortable. And over, a few 100,000 years, it's proven to be a survival instinct. If a saber-toothed tiger attacks 100 of us, we can probably fuck with it. The problem in that equation is if it's 100 saber-toothed tigers and 100 humans, you don't think critically about it, and you go, well, we can overpower them, but you really can't, because they're better killers than humans are. Anyway, so until a handful of things happen, we raise the level of critical thinking skills in America. We somehow genetically modify all future generations to have better thinking skills and better cognitive skills, which isn't going to happen. I mean, you get into the South where it's okay to marry your cousin. This just ain't going to happen until a handful of that, and or additionally, the average American is given the time to actually think about these things. Uh, you know, uh, don't look for any change in the going forward. Our politicians are not concerned about on both sides of the aisle are not concerned about as concerned as they need to be about the well-being of their constituents. They're interested in getting elected and how much money can I raise. And in a large number of issues, it's how much financial wealth can I accumulate by whatever fucking means, because I have insider information, I have privilege, I have blah 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 blah. So don't look for our leaders to be pioneering any kind of movement toward climate change or even thinking about climate change. And as an adjunct, I forget who said it, but there is a huge propaganda campaign, and anyway, I'll land it there.
Yeah, it is a major issue, and I don't see it getting better until it gets worse. And I think we are going to have to. Uh, well, I did see it extraordinary, although it is partially because of the time of year. But there's currently 2 million unoccupied homes in Florida, and some of that is seasonality. But this time of year is February, so that's typically when Florida is near peak, is where you have the most people who are residing there. Uh, all the snowbirds except for the ones who come from uh, Canada, who are right now
That's
avoiding going to Florida.
yes.
Well,
The snowbirds aren't flying there. We're
yeah,
done.
and Sal, thank you for chiming in. You're absolutely correct. Until a pain hits a critical mass, there isn't going to be any change. And by the way, on CNBC this morning, they did about a 10-minute uh, uh, part or piece on new housing. Home starts are down, contracts are down.
Yeah.
Half of it is blamed on the interest rates are rising, and the other side of it is it's just unaffordable. It doesn't make any sense to sell your home where you've got a 4% mortgage and then acquire one at 6.8. It's stupid. So there there aren't
Blue.
there aren't any new homes being built because everybody can't afford it or qualify for it, and nobody's selling, and that then raises the price of existing homes that are on the market right out of the range of anybody to be able to afford it. And Florida is a prime example of that real estate market.
Well, the reason I mentioned Florida is because the main reason people are not or are either abandoning houses or not moving to Florida is currently Florida has the highest homeowners insurance rates in the country. I wouldn't be surprised if it's in the entire world right now. And that is because of climate change. It's because I think Allstate and State Farm just booked. They said, screw this. We are out of here. We cannot make money anymore underwriting policies in this state. And that's going to only continue to happen as more and more regions are incapable of break even with insurance policies. Every once in a while, when a storm hits, and suddenly you have 10,000 homes destroyed.
Yeah, and
Uh,
add California to that list.
California is a different issue. Yeah, California isn't flooding. California is fires, although it's also landslides. Sorry, I wasn't paying attention. Is it Robert and then Deirdre, or?
Yeah, thanks again, Sal. I just wanted to expand a little on this bit about is the human mind suited to combat climate change? Well, in my 50-something years on this planet of analyzing the human mind, I will say that we have a very split level in my own personal opinion, a split level ability to be able to subjectively encompass what sort of results we would like to see with that. I do believe there are so many people outside, speaking collectively, I suppose, across the planet that do have that ability to be able to have the mind needed to actually take on board climate change. But as of course, as Pup's comments just actually embodied the very essence of of not least with the US mindsets of exactly why there are so many within the US who are, at a loss with being able to not least talk about climate change because of what goes on in their lives and how taken up they are with their lives and actually just getting by to their next paycheck. Um, that does, I'm afraid to say, and that is replicated out in many countries, isn't it? There's so many people in dire poverty that actually are so busy trying to scrape a living together just to be able to survive alone, let alone be able to take on board in their mind or think about something that is so big, so large, and so complicated that it would, as it does with many minds, just fuse the brains. Sorry, Sal, were you going to say something?
Yes, and this is something that I'm afraid to say is probably unique to America, but the state of Florida about
Right.
2 years ago pretty much made it so that state officials cannot discuss climate change.
Right.
It's like we are sticking our fingers in our ears and we are going to hum and we are going to consciously not just ignore, but we are going to stifle discussions on climate change. And of course, again, the insurance companies said, well, we ain't going to do that. We're paying full attention because we are paying every time a claim comes in, we are losing money.
Absolutely.
So
So
this is, so this is the problem, is that reality doesn't care about your opinion. Reality doesn't pay attention to your religion. Reality doesn't care about your politics or your party. When the time comes for the water to flow, the water will flow.
Well, this is it, so in a nutshell. And as I've said many times before, physics will not do bargains with people who are intent on destroying every last drop of a survivable planet. Physics does not do bargains with oligarchs, billionaires, governmental administrations, with psychopathic leaders within their administrations. Physics will have the last word fundamentally, as I've always said and will continue to say. Physics is the last decider. If we continue to screw up on the levels that we are doing, I've already made it perfectly clear with the scientific data that has been at my fingertips that within the next 10 years, we'll see such suffering, not just within US communities, but across all communities globally, which we are, just in case anybody had any doubt, within the human population, the like and extent that which is going to make heads spin, if I can put it like that. So it really is a case of, sorry, sir.
Although to be blunt, for the next few years, I think a lot of people will be doing U-turns if they intended to come to the United States.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. There will be a lot of that, I can tell you. After all, I'm afraid to say that at this moment in time, we've got such mental lunacy coming out of the White House that it's trying to actually bury the word science itself at all conceivable levels. Only mentally deranged psychopaths would even think about burying science, wouldn't they? I mean, you've got to be mentally disturbed to even want to even go there. You've got to be deranged to want to bury science. And of course, they'll stop at nothing in order to carry out their twisted and sick ends of, firing incredible, good, talented, hardworking, dedicated scientists, shutting down scientific administrations, etc., etc. The like of it is just, I hardly have the words to express how angry I am about it, as I'm sure everyone knows how goddamn angry I am about it. But anyway, just to be brief, because I know Pop and Deirdre have got their hands up. So I will wind this up with am I still on? My float, my
Yes,
screen.
you are.
I don't know what the hell happened then, so I'm sorry, my friend, the screen went blank. Anyways, I just wanted to wind it up because I know we got hands.
Oh,
I just wanted to
okay.
say that. Yeah, sorry, carry
Finish.
on, sir.
No, please finish.
Oh, right. Okay. Thank you. Anyway, as I was saying, just to carry that point across about if the human mind is suited to combat climate change, it very much depends and will continue to depend on how many human minds actually want to accept some level of responsibility. If they don't accept it now, they might be wise enough to accept it later when all communities are either underwater or burning to an ash with extreme wildfires, courtesy of an ever increased hothouse atmosphere due to the insane warming of levels of our planet. So anyway, I'll wind it up there for now. If I shall probably come back at some point. So thanks again. So thank you.
Deirdre, in 10 seconds, I just want to add, we have a lot of people here who haven't joined us before, and I thank you for all coming. And if anybody wants to speak, raise a hand. We've never discriminated. We never blocked anyone from speaking. So please do so. Deirdre.
To address the statement that Democrats or Democratic elected officials are motivated by money, I did work on Jerry McNerney's campaign. Jerry McNerney was a differential geometer who worked on wind turbines and ran for Congress. And Jerry had to spend enormous amounts of time on personal calls. It did not for fundraising. It did not come naturally to him. Citizens United has caused like a huge burden. Actually, 2006 was even before Citizens United, but it's a huge burden if you want to win office in win a federal office, you have to do it. It's just required to do this level of fundraising. Does it shape? Jerry had extraordinary integrity. I mean, literally ran for Congress. First guy as just a grassroots candidate. Mr. Smith goes to Washington, printed brochures at his own expense the first time he ran, and was, driving around the district and taking the brochures out of his trunk of his car and handing them out and going to coffee house meetings. And he got like over 40% in a district that hadn't been challenged in over a decade, and it got on the DCCC radar screen. And they tried to run a former Republican, and Jerry cleaned his clock, and then the DCCC didn't even support him then. But he managed to come from behind with the help of a lot of environmental is phenomenal. And John started the Climate Caucus in the Senate, and when they were going to make some investments California in climate adaptation, and they met and had discussions. And a huge flood in '82. The second was the Loma Prieta earthquake. And the third was the CZU August Lightning Complex fire, which burned a huge part of the northern Santa Cruz County and the Santa Cruz Mountains. And at one point, 77,000 people, which is 28% of our county, had to evacuate. So it really is kind of contextual, but at least in California, people get that climate change is real, that it's an existential threat. I think the issue for us is really educating them on just how vulnerable our infrastructure is. And that's what a lot of people are fundamentally unable to grasp. And that's what I've spent a time educating people on. Then I belong to a network of climate advocacy groups around the state, and they schedule meetings all the time with legislators. Legislators work with us to propose legislation. So it's easy to get cynical and kind of say, well, Democrats or, elected officials are all for money. But when you look at them as real people and you don't have that kind of out-group characterization, and as individuals, there are some incredibly dedicated people who are working really hard to try to make positive change. It doesn't mean we don't get dirty deals sometimes in California, but they're more issue specific. So there are, people will come together, and California is spending more on climate adaptation than entire countries. And they did go to, the COPs and talk about it as a subnational group. So anyway.
It's obviously the world of politics is, most of us don't get to see the sausage being made, so we're not privy to all of the information. But I have heard from the people that I've known about this, that uh, they're very active staying a congressperson, or even a senator has it even worse, is difficult because you are literally spending your entire life on the phone begging for help. Pop.
Yeah, my comment about politicians was a 60,000-foot view. Politicians with regard to climate change exist across a spectrum. From the individuals that Deirdre just identified, all the way up to the turd in the White House, and everywhere in between. But from a 60,000-foot view, politicians, and this is probably an old statistic, it's probably gotten worse. They spend 70% of their time fundraising. That's assuming they want to get reelected. If they don't want to get reelected, then they don't spend as much time
They
doing
don't have to. Yeah.
it. So that was again a 60,000-foot view. And this statistic is, I remember reading it a number of years ago. So that this is probably not 100% accurate, but is generically probably true. If you have food in the fridge, if you have more than $100 in your bank account, if you have the means of transportation, from a global standpoint, you're in the top 1%. Um,
Yeah.
that kind of speaks badly about, we have a fairly elite room here. And I would venture a guess that all of us are in the top 1% of the global population. So, take that into consideration also when we're in conversation here. And regarding uh, uh, reality, and this is one of the statements I love throwing back at fucking right wingers, is a quote from Ayn Rand. You can ignore reality, but you can't ignore the consequences of ignoring reality. And yeah, when I pitch that to them or as a rebuttal, they're like, well, that sounds real woke. And I'm like, well, that was fucking Ayn Rand. You know who that is? You know,
Oh yeah, yeah. People need to know that she hated the Republicans. She was briefly a Democrat, and she did spend the last few years of her life on Social Security. And her the way she described it was, "Yeah, I paid into the system. I earned it."
yeah, yeah. Well, and anyway, I don't want to get into the politics of that. I just had those two comments. I'm sure there's, you know, I'm sure there's other individuals in the room, but this is, in personally in recent years, I supported. I have voted in at least the last 8 or 9 elections, and my motive was I'm voting for the motherfucker that's going to screw me the least. Um, that has always rubbed me the wrong way. But it's like, well, if I vote for the other side, I'm fucked completely. If I vote Democrat, I'm not quite as fucked. And after the last election, I'm just like, I'm sick and fucking tired of voting for somebody that is going to screw me the least. I'm going to start centering my life around, fuck it, here's my demands. Here's what needs to be done. And if you're not supporting this wide gamut of what I consider to be human rights and climate change and da 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 da, if you're not supporting that, then fuck you. I'm not going to give your campaign money. I'm not gonna advocate. Uh, yeah, I'm not going to advocate, and it's just. And the other thing is to be blunt. I have serious concerns whether we're going to have an election in 2 years anyway. So that may not even be a possibility. It may not even be a, do I need to worry about it thing. Um,
I think it's going to happen just simply because the margin is so small right now that it's not impossible with special elections that will take place in the next 2 years that the Democrats may indeed be in charge of Congress before the next election takes place.
Yeah, there are three candidates, two in Florida and one in New York, that if all three of them win, then we'll take control of Congress, and
Yeah,
maybe some common sense will start to eke out of that organization.
it's that close, and there will be deaths in the next 2 years. There will be people who are resigning early for the next 2 years. There might be new cabinet picks happening, although I think at this moment in time, there's no way on earth Trump is going to take somebody out of Congress in his cabinet, knowing that the 218, 217 could switch on a dime with one person.
No, but I can see him firing certain cabinet officials if they even step out
Oh yeah,
one step out of line,
no,
and then somebody worse get in there. I mean,
he'll fire the
Hegseth
cabinet, but he's
Patel.
not going to take. Oh God, he'll fire a cabinet member, but he's not going to replace them with a sitting congressperson.
Correct.
That
Well,
is suicide.
maybe he's fucking dumb enough to do that. Let's all hope he is.
Deidre.
I did want to say that the other thing I've noticed is people evaluate situations based on their historic experience. And we saw that in California with the 2012 to 2016 drought. And even though many are increasing in frequency and severity due to climate change, I talked with the state water project operator, and he said, "Oh, I thought it was a once in a generation event, and it was 21, 22, and we were having another very severe drought." And he just, reasonable. And we're also seeing this, we really are in a tipping point in governance of the United States that is similar to what countries in Europe have gone through. And it's not within the experience of most Americans. And, people can see what's happening with, I think the most ominous development is Hegseth dismissing the chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and the Admiral of the Navy and the Judge Advocates General that would review an order for whether it was a lawful order that, at the request of a member of the Joint Chiefs of Staff or other senior military officials. So there's, the weaponization of the Department of Justice and the FBI we're just seeing now. I do think there will still be elections, but there are likely to tilt the playing field. One of the things that Elon Musk has said, I think, is, it's in person and on election day, and you have to the win, but one of the things I've seen is people just fundamentally aren't able to grasp how profoundly the political climate is changing. And I see people 26 elections, it's going to be too late. It's one of the reasons why I've been devoting so much time to try to, get people to, connect and support and have, better pushback about online narratives, because those are the media, the social media ecosystem has largely been insulating Republican elected officials from what's happening, but it's starting to break down. Things like the Epstein files, several years in the entire can make a difference. But if we don't pull together, we will lose our democracy. And if you look at what's happening with Musk, and Congress is being sidelined, and so I bring this up because it's profoundly important to both climate mitigation and adaptation, and dismantling the entire research enterprise, scientific research enterprise, funding, indirect cost funding formula that supported universities is just major. I did talk with Michael Mann, and he said it's hitting them really hard. It's hitting every client who's federally funded or is employed by the federal government. Very hard. We're losing data sets. Hands and say, well, I'm not going to support the Democrats. We're going
I'm sorry. Please go on.
Yeah, thanks. Sorry, were you telling me I could go on? So I wasn't sure.
Actually, I'm sorry. Tim was speaking, so and then you'll be immediately after.
Yeah, thanks. Oh, sorry.
I want to speak. Hi, John.
Oh, great. Hi, John. And thank you, Pup.
I think I've just enabled him.
Oh, did you? Okay. Well, I mean, so much has been touched on. I just more than $100 in the bank account. And if some type of economic collapse were to happen, hopefully I could survive. It's months to years, but not beyond that. And the world's top 1% own more wealth. This idea that people really don't have time to think because they've got to be working all the time is movement. You know, I was just wanting to find something. One thing I like to say to people on Twitter, and this goes back to Elon Musk, is that he is funding $100 million prize for carbon removal. You know, if you go to the X Prizes on his website, it says that the climate crisis is the biggest crisis facing humanity, and that we must lower CO2 emissions in the air. So even though he's flip flopped, that evidence is still there, and I like to broadcast that every once in a while, especially when dealing with a climate denier, because you know, I think many of them worship him. Or how could that and I mean, it does, in a way it feeds into it, because it's about technology getting us out of this mess, and that there's a prize for it. But on the other hand, it is also admitting that there's a problem. Um, there's talking about people who don't have time on their hands to think about the climate crisis, is the idea that um, the human mind, it's called I think it's called the 10-minute mind, where basically, you know, we have to react and to get food, and we don't have time for other things, and also that the different parts of our brain developed at different times, such as the cerebrum, which is the area that is responsible for logic and reason, for the limbic system, which is the area that's responsible for emotions, feelings, responses to food and sex, bonding and attachment and memory, and also the reptilian part of the brain, which is the oldest part, which has to do with fight or flight, physical survival, reproduction, social stature, and it's hardwired for ritual and instinct. Dr. Reese, he talks about how, although the brain works as one, they also aren't as integrated, these different areas of the brain, as we like to think. So when we fight, I don't like the way I'm feeling. So, you know, it's nice to think that we can um, teach people how to think critically, and level of comfort and safety. And I think what's happening in America today, as well as across the world, um, it 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 puts people in fear, so they can't think about really, like,
The Atlanta Fed here in the United States is now forecasting a possible first quarter recession. Jesus Christ. I'm sorry.
environments that posed only modest challenges to the repertoire of emotions, behavioral predispositions, and survival strategies. Like our ancestors, we tend to fixate on a single problem at a single time, such to try to put the he argues that most of us don't get complexity. We don't connect the dots among the various environmental problems. But when our brains evolved, these qualities were perfectly adequate for survival.
Then there yourself for your tribe. We have the ability to make more mistakes now than we had in the past, and maybe this is why. Maybe this is running. Running. Do I chased by a saber-toothed tiger? It's there's so much more for us to think of that. Um, our survival instincts are swamped. Uh, Starlink isn't as robust as fiber or wire.
I understand.
I mean, I understand. Yeah, I understand. That's a political. That's not
Hang on a second.
technology. Tools. Now it's make it as you can. You know, buy and sell stocks while you're an active politician. Be our guest. We don't.
I'm pretty relaxed, but I did tell him I want a new shrink because I'm not. My other ones. Thank you for everything, and if you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
Sure.
You know.
Welcome to the show. Thanks for joining. Completely different things.
software, and they developed software that does surveillance and the script kiddies, like the whole thing where they're hacking into capability. It's not like the NSA didn't always have this, but it's another getting rid of the deep state. The deep state was, all of these scientists, all of these experts in government were, a sanity check on everything. They provided input into how the whim of, a mad king. And that's where we are now is like
Deirdre,
the whole,
let me interrupt you very, very briefly. Palantir stock is literally doing a Tesla right now, although Tesla, I think, is actually up today. It's falling through the floor. So maybe they're here. Maybe somebody's listening to you.
but Palantir is employees are but in some sense it doesn't matter if they get huge government contracts. I mean, I think Elon Musk got 38 billion. So just like we're in an incredibly attempts to suppress dissent in ways that weren't possible people to make accounts on Signal and use because other communities so I just be cautious.
Well, just
to speak freely, you are in a serious, you have issues with your society. And this is, I don't want to say the obvious 1984 correspondence, but this is
Yes.
problematic.
Well, and you know what, Sal? With the comments that Elon Musk has been making on Twitter about the justice system and the checks and balance that America has in place, I would say you're being naive if you're openly discussing things.
So we should start talking in code.
We've got
There
to
are
come up some
certain
codes. So, what's our
keywords that
term for
I'm not
climate
using
crisis? What's our
anymore.
term for climate crisis? Maybe we can make this into a double speak workshop.
Don't let those idiots
Say I
scare you.
stopped using disinformation as much, and I changed the name of my chat group from counter disinformation to counter ops, just because I would, I think I'll do searches for keywords, and so sort of changing your keywords slightly may help. But I literally stopped using fight disinformation because I'm like, well, there's a red flag, like look here. So it's not gonna, if you really get a lot of attention, I just have to be careful because I'm working closely with Peter Hotez too, and he's probably the number 3 biomedical person on the targets. The top targets were Fauci and Bill Gates, but I think he's number 3. And so, I'm just conscious of that. So I'm a little more cautious about how I phrase things and what I post
I'm not.
online. It's part of the reason why I'm doing such a graph.
This is
Yeah,
John.
John, you can do that. You're not working with somebody who's going to be straight in the targets for FBI and DOJ.
I understand it. That's my dog's barking because some mag is walking up the street. But what was I going to say? Oh, yeah, they just had a protest over here at Josh Hawley's office over on the Missouri side. They protested over at Josh Hawley. He's the guy that raised his fist on January 6th when he was walking into work. He's a senator that raised his fist up in the air, and the one that they showed running down the hall, scared shitless. But yeah, they had a big protest over there yesterday, and but the thing is, you can't be afraid to speak. That's me. I'll say anything I want to say. They want to come knocking at my door. Let them come knock at my damn door, but they better show their badge first. And if they want to come in, they better have a search warrant because I've got something that I carry around that I'll stop them with, and it'll stop them. And I'm not afraid. So I just, the Marine comes out in me so much that I just and I read where the Marine Corps now has gone in and they're changing some of their, uh, the DEI stuff and all that. They're not going away from the DEI. Marine Corps is not, but they're just tweaking a few things in there. And you should have seen all the Marines that got on there. They said bullshit. Don't listen to them. Don't listen to them. The Marines, you put us out there, we'll take care of business. That's what we need. And
Yeah,
I'm done.
we never planned on discussing that, but I think we might as well because to me the whole idea of taking 14,000 well-trained, seasoned veterans who clearly know what they're doing and just saying, "Well, you can't work anymore for us because you're transsexual." Who cares? You can't say you're against DEI and then you're going to get rid of people just because of one factor. You cannot possibly say that you actually care about having the right people for the job, and you can't claim to be a meritocracy and then throw people out for any one individual reason that has nothing to do with their capabilities.
I
I'm
don't.
sorry, that was a rant.
I don't know if that's in the UCMJ, Uniform Code of Military Justice.
Yes, you're right. It's not.
And
They have to rewrite the book.
yeah, so they'd have to do something about that. But they don't have to obey the president either. Okay, that's a misnomer too. I've said that before. You can look that up. Just Google officers oath of, when they take their oath.
Nuremberg trials. Yeah, I was only following orders is not an excuse.
No, you don't have to follow orders if you deem them to be incorrect and bad for your men. But I don't know where I'm going here, but I had a real bad day yesterday. Bad day, terrible day, and I just uh, I was just so fed up with this shit. It just
I think a lot of us are stringing a lot of those.
Yeah, I know, but I keep telling myself, just let it go, and it'll work out in the end, because we have to we've got to pound Congress to impeach him. That's what we need to do. I put it out there. You can go and look at my stuff. I put out there, impeach, Trump. I put it out there all the time. I don't call him Trump. I call him felon. So I put impeach the felon. Impeach him. All you need is 218 votes. Jesus, that's all Congress needs. And if we can get those votes in April, then we'll impeach the son of a gun. But that's what needs to be done. Impeach him, or let's bring the 25th Amendment up. Let's go. But these guys are so afraid that they're going to lose their, that Congress, after starting in August, they do not have to pay into their Social Security. Okay, there's a cap on how much you have to pay
Yes.
into your Social Security. They reached that cap around August. Some of the other ones might reach it in June or July, the ones that get paid more. But they don't have to pay that. And they don't, So there they go, What is it? August, September, October, November, December. 5 months they don't have to pay. And we have to pay year round, So, but they don't. And they're just haven't seen anything where they're cutting their pay. I want let's cut it down, save some money there. Let's cut out all the trips, all the boondoggles, coming home every damn weekend. Let's cut that out. No more freebies. But everybody's afraid. Everybody's afraid. I'm not afraid to say it to them. That's the thing. I've told them, Deidre knows, from these conversations, that I will speak my mind face to face to an elected official, because to me, he works for me. If he works for me,
Exactly.
If he works for me, he better listen to me, because by God, he puts his pants on the same way I do, and I'm not afraid of him. And I don't know. I'm not saying I'm not dangerous by any means, but I could be if the wrong thing is said to me, by one of those idiots. But they're not worth going to jail for. That's the way I look at it. And
I'm just going to add a little bit of color, and then I'll give the floor to Pup.
yeah,
In the United States, we have the FICA limit that once you can only pay up to Social Security taxes up to $176,000 a year of income. So if you have more than 176 K of income, you're not charged for that, and you're not charged for it, and your employer are not charged for it. So that's what we're dealing with here. That's they could fix the Social Security problem for every American for an eternity if instead of having a 176K limit, they said, all right, 1 million limit. But they don't want to do it because that would then mean that the rich have to pay more taxes, and that they don't like paying more taxes. Pup, what you got?
Well, a couple comments. First off, thanks for your service, Marine. That comes from a 20-year veteran of the Navy. Anyway, I'm not scared of these motherfuckers either. But I want to go back to the security and encryption. Yes, most people don't use the encryption that's available on X, but it's really kind of worthless because it's such light encryption. My God, I could fucking crack that with my laptop. So I don't bother to use it. What I do use is a fucking VPN to access literally everything. Now, having said that, all the pieces on the chessboard are in place. We've got Kash Patel, director of FBI. We've got all the wrong people in the Justice Department. They're cleaning house in so many areas. If they rotate to surveilling, and by the way, X is going to turn over their fucking data, and literally what's going on in this room right now. Just assume that's happening. He's already keeping psychometric data on every single one of us, and probably, at least with a high potential, using psychometric data, he knows exactly what motivates every single one of us. Again, if you've done more than 100 likes, they know you better than your coworker, or they know you as well as your coworkers. When you get to 153 likes, they know you as well as your spouse or significant other.
Hey, Pop, can I interrupt one thing?
Yeah, but
I don't want to forget it.
Go.
Did you see where Kash Patel is going to work from home in Las Vegas?
Yeah. No double standards there, huh?
That's it. Thank you.
What I really want is I want somebody like SNL to do a sketch on Kash Patel playing poker. Because with those eyes, he's gonna tell every hand. You'll wipe him out in the first 10 minutes.
Well, interestingly enough, Sal, Scared Ketchup is doing a video on Kash Patel currently, which pretends to be absolutely grab your sides and roll on the floor funny. But no, moving to Signal, Signal can be decrypted. It takes an enormous amount of CPU horsepower because it is end-to-end encryption. But it can be, if you're a high enough target, they can focus on you and they can decrypt your signal transmissions, either voice, video, or text. But Signal's about the best thing we have right now. If I'm going to converse with a group of individuals that I associate with, and I don't want it to go over a public switch telephone network, then it's Signal without a doubt, because it's probably 90 or 95% secure.
Excuse me, Pop. Just a question. I was just thinking about this the other day. What about landlines? Are they more secure than what we're doing right now, or what we're communicating on right now?
No, absolutely no.
Extremely low bandwidth.
Well, it's not the extremely low bandwidth.
It's a 3K bandwidth. So because it's a 3K bandwidth, it's like nothing to decrypt.
Yeah, well, and the other thing is they can get a wiretap warrant literally at the flick of the stroke of a pen. So no, it is not secure in any way, shape, or form. And by the way, that could be a FISA warrant, and nobody other than the actual warrant holders and the judge, a FISA judge, would know that warrant existed. That's how they catch drug dealers, by the way. That think that a landline is more secure than that. Now, and I'm going to get off on a tangent. I'm sorry, Sal, if I'm out of bounds. Well, I and a handful of individuals are working on a shortwave based communications network. For instance, I purchased one of these cheap Baofeng radios that can, although it is not originally designed to operate on the GMRS frequency bands, I then reprogrammed them so that they will. I bought 12 of those radios and passed them out to my local community, friends and family, extended family, and then I'm in the process, once we get some warm weather, of putting up a GMSR antenna that is going to feed a repeater station. So in other words, anybody within 100 miles will be able to talk to anybody else within that 100-mile radius.
I worked a little bit with that. So I might be the only other person who actually understands what you're talking about. So please go into more detail.
Yeah, well, the next step is we're going to make a GMRS to 160 meter band repeater. And that should reliably, given enough power, I'm thinking 500 watt linear, should be able to get us communication out to my buddies in Denver, Colorado from northern Minnesota. That will also should be able to cover transmissions all the way up into Canada. If you pull out a map and draw a line between Denver and say Minneapolis, and then extend that line up past the Canadian border, about 1,200 miles from Denver, then we should be able to cover that. I'm also working on and have at least 2 individuals who live in the eastern part of the United States, and one that lives in in California, to put up 160 meter to GMRS repeaters. That will also be used to start broadcasting, and we'll have to get a FCC broadcast license, but start broadcasting in the 6 to 12 meter band, or 6 to 12 megahertz band, and that anybody can go out and buy a $10 radio on Amazon that will receive that. They won't be able to transmit, but they'll be able to receive it. This is, and we're also looking at illegally encrypting some of those transmissions that are more critical. The other thing we're looking at is there are common modes of modulation when you're doing continuous wave transmission, and we're looking at, through the use of SDRs, software-defined radios, of developing our own modulation standard, and then using that effectively is encrypting it. Because if your radio doesn't know what the modulation standard is that you're using, it's all going to come through gobbledygook.
That's Headley, not Hetty.
Say again?
That's Headley, not Hetty.
Yes. Yes, thank you.
Anybody else get that reference?
Yeah. The bottom line here is a handful of us have identified that communications is going to be tantamount in the upcoming months. And we don't trust the digital community because they can kill switch that in a heartbeat, and or do man-in-the-middle attacks and effectively nullify your communications or change your communications. So we're taking steps to enable, as time goes forward, to enable this type of space and communication going forward. And at that, if you got any questions, I'll be happy to. I'm going to go not back down to listener, but I'll shut the fuck up.
I'm going to just briefly explain my joke and what he was saying. In the early 1940s, Hollywood actress Hedy Lamarr came up with the idea for not frequency shift keying, but for spread spectrum, the ability for a signal to change from one frequency to another in a semi-random way that would avoid detection by your enemies. So essentially, she invented internet communications. She invented all wireless communications. This actress this came up with the idea that we use across the board for any complicated telecommunications. Literally, like, Arthur C. Clarke, and gave away a multi-billion-dollar idea to help the war effort. And in Blazing Saddles, one of the characters played by Harvey Korman, his name was Headley Lamarr, not Hedy Lamarr. So he made a joke about his name being different than her name. So yeah, had a little bit of a radiography lesson here, but from Pup today. I think I'm sorry, I didn't see who's is it Deirdre or Robert?
I think it was Deirdre. I think it was Deirdre next. Sal,
Please,
if it helps you. I think so.
Then yeah. Then Deirdre, please.
I did want to say Ash Patel is that he's a QAnon believer. And one of the reasons I think he's going to go after people, the biomedical community, and particularly people who are involved in COVID response, and is because he believes the pandemic narrative. He believes there's a vast evil conspiracy and that, COVID was deliberately developed and released on the world. And it's very dangerous to have an FBI director that believes that. Peter is at continued risk. Paul Offit probably is as well. I'm really glad they pardoned Fauci, but I'm encouraging Peter to, be part of a chorus of voices, because if you're the only one speaking out, you're more likely to get repressed. But it's not just malicious investigation and potentially malicious prosecution from the Department of Justice. They were going to go after Anthony Fauci for lying to Congress, and it's a 5-year sentence. And it was like they just kept calling him before House committees, and he'd be called to testify, and he denied that there was gain of function research. And there really wasn't, but Rand Paul interpreted some of the research as gain of function. And I have no doubt that if Biden hadn't pardoned Fauci, that they would have prosecuted him and they would have tried to put him away in prison for 5 years.
How do you,
for that?
Who is on trial? When you put somebody on trial for lying to Congress, who's the jury? Congress?
So it really depends. It may just be an administrative trial. It may be, there may be a jury. Not all criminal trials are jury trials. I actually happen to have
tribunal.
experience with the legal profession, and it's why I'm so cautious about, malicious prosecution. One would hope that Fauci would have been acquitted, but you don't know.
You
And
don't want
just
to, yeah.
being prosecuted at its own stress. And there's also they're weaponizing the IRS, and so they can audit people. And at the same time, there's these hate narratives, and Fauci was he's been needing security because he gets his address is publicly known, and he gets death threats. He has a security detail that on every time he goes out in public, he's needed that kind of security, and it's just awful. But the combination of sort of weaponized hate and malicious prosecution, it's not something you want to expose yourself to lightly. And so, I did realize that if I supported Peter, that he could be he's, at the top of the list, and I could be targeted as well. So I'm just, I did it consciously. If I have to go to prison, I will, but I'm going to be careful about managing that risk. And part of it is, I'm a little more cautious. I'm not as forward as I would be in organizing. I'm a little more cautious about what I post publicly. I am trying to get people to go to Signal. Again, it's just a risk management sort of thing. It's not that I'm saying don't take risks. I'm saying be smart in how you take risks. And if you're involved in something that you know is going to be targeted, like I am, then, be proactive in managing those risks. Because, they will come through. I am very conscious. I do correspond with Peter on X, and I'm very conscious to don't send anything that I wouldn't be willing to have read aloud to me in a trial. I don't send things that, seem hateful or potentially violent or threatening. And, so it's also part of the reason why I'm consciously working to reduce hate on X, because I do think we're going to see this, and I think it's going to be pretty horrible. I think they are certainly going to target leading biomedical researchers in the U.S., leading spokespeople, and I don't know who else. And with H5N1, there's the risk that they're going to start doing a witch hunt about H5N1 and some totally bogus, made-up lab leak conspiracy. So
I was just about to say that it sounds like a witch hunt, thinking McCarthyism, and also Salem, Massachusetts. What year was that? Like 1602 or something? Does anybody know?
No, I just want to break in very quickly because I did get some. I've been joking about hitting F5 all day long. I do have the sea ice data for yesterday, and we are now not just firmly in second lowest in history for the South Pole. We are now the third lowest minima in history. We're about to reach second lowest minima in history. I'm pretty sure tomorrow we're going to break that record, which means actually today, but tomorrow it'll be announced. Um, that's for Antarctic Ocean extent. Arctic Ocean extent. I looked at the data, which again just came in, and my eyeballs are out of their sockets. Um, we dropped another 100,000 yesterday, 100,000 square kilometers. Higher record low. It isn't funny. And I mean, not just, Arctic and Antarctic, but globally. This is the lowest by about a 500,000 square kilometers for any February 28th on record. I'll do those charts later on. But it's like, if any one of you, I know most of you do follow what I put out. The charts are scary at times when I look at global ice, which is why ice has been our topic for 3 straight weeks. I'm hoping next week history by next week, because it would have to really, all hell would have to break loose for it not to be. But this is a major climate issue that we will be talking about for a long time to come. And if we don't have anyone else wanting to, Robert, go ahead. And then
Yeah, thanks, Sal. Of the implosion of Trump's administration, in my honest opinion, will be happening a lot sooner than the end of his administration term for the election deadline in 4 years. I honestly believe that. We have a mental maniac with an administration here that has a no-holds-bar war on science at all levels, not just within the United States, but I honestly believe that Trump's capabilities, if he could actually dismantle science across the planet from country to country, he would undoubtedly major will blow, and something major will take place within that administration, because he's taking unprecedented risks here. He's taking unprecedented steps to actually do things that are totally morally and democratically unacceptable at so many levels. And I am absolutely outraged, and I am absolutely goddamned livid with the global media that normalize a fascist government, a fascist administration within the US. Have you noticed that no one within any media situation, have you noticed it, be it the largest media corps on our planet or the smallest ones? Have you noticed it, that there is no talking on live TV about how utterly sick this fascist administration is? within Washington. Have you noticed there is no media talking about just how wrong this administration is on all levels? No, the media are keeping silent about it because even if they do know, they're being paid very handsomely to keep silent at all levels about this. We know that there are hand in hand silence is taking place across the media regime in its entirety. I don't need to keep banging on about media complicity in this climate emergency. I see it every single second of every goddamn day of my life that I put data out in terms of what I talk about. The media are the major, fundamental, ongoing stumbling block problems on our planet in every country. That there has been no coverage of this Arctic ice sheet loss on any major news channels to any given major extent. Have you noticed this? Yes, my answer is yet again for a crisis that's continually downplayed at all levels, no matter what the cost of public truth and information, it continues to be downplayed. There is every reason on earth for that. The reasons, of course, are the eternal backhanders that are given within the oligarchs and billionaire handshakes within these global media institutions that effectively make sure that no matter what the cost, all truth on these emergencies that continue to take place, be it Antarctic ice sheet lost by the second, by the day, and be it all levels of collapse that are now playing out across our planet, are continually suppressed and silenced no matter what it takes. I've always said, and I will continue to say, no, the public will not accept this. The public demand to have the truth given to them. The public will get the truth given to them. If I've got anything personally to do with it, I've said part of my crusade while I still have breath on this planet is to hold all of the certain parts of our planet at this very moment to continue to actually bring forward the necessary levels of what's needed to be done to oust these fascist administrations from power. I will honestly say that in terms of removing Trump, I now feel that every single ability and everything must be pulled out like never before in order to remove this individual from this fascist infected nest that we find himself nestling in within the White House. And I do honestly believe he can be removed. I've continually said that. I think there are ways and means of doing it. And I think everyone across our planet must look into every single possible nook and cranny in order to enable him to be either impeached or removed on defamation of environmental climate policy or some cases that actually can be brought to a court hearings en masse in order to impeach or to remove. I've said it many times before, and I know that if enough people say it, and I will say this because I know Pub's got his hand up, I will be brief. I will say that I would honestly expect, and I do hope, that all scientists across our planet continue to stand up en masse like never before and speak the truth to the public at every given opportunity, even if they've not even thought about doing it before. I know my friend Peter Kalmus in the US is a champion of standing up for speaking out. And I do implore all global scientists to actually speak and deafen all the places that need to be deafened in order to get the amount of information across that needs to be put across. I will close with saying that I do honestly believe that our fight has everything in terms of being able to be won. We can win this fight. We stand firm. We fight like every single day matters. We fight like our lives depend on it because they do. So that's it for me for now. Thanks. So.
Okay, Pop.
Yeah, let me front load this with Sal, your analysis on a wide variety of topics is just super duper spiffy. I love fucking facts, man.
I'll quote that super duper spiffy.
Yeah. But with regarding polar and Antarctic ice sheets, you know, I've been to the North or near the North Pole 3 times. The first time in the 1970s, and when we punched through the ice, we punched through 3 feet. We did one last ice X shortly before I left military service, and we punched through 6 or 7 feet of ice. I'm fairly well connected into the submarine community, and my people are telling me that when they punch through the ice up there at the same time of the year, at roughly the same latitude and longitude, they are now punching through 3 feet of ice. So, Sal, I really like your charts and graphs, but I don't need them because I'm getting real world information that, yeah, fuck it. We just surface. It's like crunch, crunch, it's done. Rather than punching through 15 feet of ice, which, if you can imagine, might be quite noisy and nerve wracking. Yeah, I don't need your charts, man, but they're really good.
By the way, I just added 2 more, and I in the post I say that this stuff is almost automated, so I really don't have to work that hard to get them out. Did you?
Oh, where are they? Did you
yeah,
add them to the?
2 of them are added. I'm staring at one.
Okay.
Man, I really like the way this is formatted, even though I could have cleaned it up a little bit more. Did you hear about what's happening in the about like what is 100 little less than that? Okay, Svalbard or Greenland. Svalbard is Norway, and Nook is Greenland. And in the last, like 78 degrees north, 78 degrees north, and people are swimming in the Arctic Ocean for recreation.
Is that still considered a polar bear dip, or
Actually, the polar bears are saying it's too warm.
Oh, dear.
He ate holy flying fuck sticks, Batman. Anyway,
we're boiling.
Yeah,
We're boiling.
If people are
we can
able,
boil a lobster in it.
If people are able to walk out onto the not quite a beach, but the Greenland, which is 78 degrees north latitude, and they can see water. If they can see water typically in May, that's considered. Oh, look, that's early this year. That's
we're in trouble.
So if they're able to see it and by the way, I'm saying late in February, but it's been like that for a month. So they've been. I'll tell you one thing. It's probably a lot easier this year to be a fisherman in Greenland than it's been in centuries, because the water is open and accessible.
I'm thinking that, what is that show called again? The Alaska.
Oh God.
The guys out on there. Yeah, I watched that for a few seasons. I have to admit it.
I haven't seen it. I know about it. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I don't even know if it's still on air, but yeah, they're probably having a good season.
Well, that's very limited. They're only allowed to. Oh my God. I don't know if you guys know about this, but we lost something in the realm of 4 billion king crabs in the last few years, because global warming has made the waters so great that the crab population crashed. Now, I know this is, you go to a restaurant and king crab is like $30 a pound, and it's incredibly expensive because it's hard to get it. It's not that it's rare. It's that these people are literally risking life and limb to get it. And it's a very energy intensive endeavor to go out there and to fish for these crabs. But we lost billions of them in the last couple of years, because the waters are too warm and they just can't they can't grow properly.
I had a neighbor, probably about, let's say 15, 20 years ago, an elderly woman who grew up in Nova Scotia. I guess she probably grew up being a schoolgirl, let's say in the 1930s and 40s. And the joke was that every day to school, the kids that weren't well off, they brought to school the lobster sandwiches
Yep.
and the crab sandwiches, while the children from the well-off families were bringing the peanut butter and jelly sandwiches.
Yeah, it's the old joke. If you go to Maine, it's the joke that they used to serve to the prisoners. They used to serve them lobster. I know that this is hard to imagine, but back then, the way you caught
Down to like the local level. There's a gentleman who's a hydrolysis hy, hydrologist.
Hydrologist.
No, the Dree, hydrologist. Sure, 30 centimeters of the ice melt occurred, and about up to 5 meters over the last year. There was another in Banff National Park, which is south of Jasper National Park, and only about, let's say, an hour's drive from Calgary. I've been there. It's four. They had 4.7 meters of melt up to the end of August, which was slightly lower than the melt of 2023 at 6.5 meters. Well, they've been looking at that. Yes, warmer temperatures are one of the culprits, but also another factor that we have to think about, especially going forward, is the effects of wildfire smoke in darkening the surface of the glaciers and decreasing the reflectiveness of the sunlight, as we know, that's albedo. They say that glaciers should reflect about 30% of the solar radiation, but in recent years, they feel that at least the Athabasca Glacier has only been reflecting about 15%. So, and then there was a study in 2022 that found that the darkening of the ice due to the soot from the wildfires can increase the melt rate of a glacier by about 10% after the smoke clears, and also because of algae that's present
yes.
in on the ice and the snow, it keeps the soot there, and year after year, it contributes to this ice melt. This is a huge problem, I feel.
This is an amazing recent discovery in the last few years. It's is it algae or lichens that are actually growing on the ice, and it's because as the ice is warming up, these lichens, I think it's lichens, are actually
It says here
okay.
algae, but
Algae.
it could be. It does say algae
They,
grow on the
they
ice.
they are green or purple, and they are, because obviously they're instead of having ice, which is an incredible reflector, when you have these guys growing on the ice, they change the color of the ice dramatically. Instead of being a near perfect reflector, it is now absorbing. So, and this is becoming a global issue now with these. All right, what the heck is icephilic? Cryophilic, with these cryophilic bacteria and algae.
Right. Well, I mean, and also this is concerning because these glaciers they help with the drought proofing for mountain rivers during the hottest, driest weather. Obviously, so many people are relying on glaciers for their drinking water and also for habitat for trout and salmon and also consistent hydroelectricity generation. So there's so many issues that are at that, that intersection of glacier melt.
So, I mentioned this obviously, last week as we were closing, the data came in, and I started to look at it during the space. I have the Ceres data. Ceres is a series of satellites that NOAA owns that gives us information on a slew of topics of cloud cover, optical density, how much sunlight is coming in, how much sunlight is penetrating the atmosphere, how much uh, radiation, either sunlight based, which is long wave, or IR based shortwave radiation, is leaving the Earth's surface, and how much of that is going out to space. And every month I look at that data and I joke about it that, I used to have hair, but I don't anymore, because every time I look at one of these data points, it's just, there's nothing there for me to hang my hat and say, oh yeah, this is what's causing it. It's all over the place. It's all of the assumptions that people make, especially the climate deniers, is that, oh yeah, Sven Smart said that when you have a low solar activity, then you get cloud cover because the cloud nucleation is occurring more frequently because you have more high energy X-rays going into the atmosphere. Bullshit! None of this is happening. Excuse my French. Clouds are not causing global warming. Cloud reflectivity is not causing it. Cloud density, that is optical density, is how much light goes through. If you shine a light through something, the optical density is how much goes out the other end. And the optical density of clouds is they're getting darker. They're not getting lighter. So one of the things that people were saying was, well, clouds must be getting lighter, so they pass more light through, and that's why there's more global warming. None of this is happening. The Looking at this data is shortening my life expectancy. Although on the other hand, wanting to find out what's going on is probably keeping me alive. Deirdre? I think, yeah. Is Deirdre's the only hand up at the
Yeah,
moment?
go ahead. I just wanted to say, so I worked with a bunch of environmental groups and fishing and tribal groups in California, as far as the media not covering this, in California water issues. And we just didn't accept that the media wasn't covering things or wasn't covering them in ways that needed to be covered. And so there was a conscious effort to reach out to the media, and particularly, this is an event. I would urge everybody, I went and did a search for Arctic sea ice. The largest account we have right now is Elliot Jacobson. I would suggest everybody needs to, like and retweet that. And I would really suggest, rather than, pulling your hair out about corporate media, you can get to know, as a volunteer, you can get to know the climate reporters that are still on X. You can follow them. A lot of them have DMs that are open. You can DM them, Elliot Jacobson's. You can explain why it's significant. And I really, like, if we want to do something about this, we need to not just talk about the problem. I mean, we can keep talking, but like, I think it's incumbent on each of us to do what we can, and particularly people who are left on X, to try to do that work, and also to try and, you know, if you have an account on Blue Sky, a lot of journalists are on Blue Sky now as well, and there's a lot of scientists, but you know, I'm consciously trying to replicate some of the media ecosystems. We're just not connecting. So, you know, connect with your large accounts, identify, you know, a key thing that's happening that's a teachable moment. This Arctic sea ice is clear. You're going to have to cut through. I mean, the shitstorm that's going on with the Trump administration, there's a, you know, and all the cuts to NWS. I mean, like, another thing that I learned to do in my decades of work on messaging was to tie it into a current story. So to the extent you can, there's a lot of coverage right now of the cuts to NOAA and the National Weather Service, and kind of tying that in, like, you know, how is this affecting monitoring of Arctic sea ice? What is the effect of the decline of Arctic sea ice likely to be on weather? I know there's a study that shows that it's likely to increase droughts in California. But like, if we're, you know, it's up to each of us to try to make a difference. It's easy to pull your hair out and oh, this isn't being covered. But I've
I'm
actually
pulling my hair
found
out
it would
because I
help.
can't figure it out.
Yeah, yeah. It's actually, you know, mapping out who's still on X, who's still covering, who the major climate reporters are, developing a relationship with them. This is something I taught volunteers all over Northern and Central California how to do. Move on, set up groups in each major city in California that would hold events. And one of the main things we trained them to do was not just to hold a rally, but how to connect with their local media and get coverage, because we wanted to move, you know, we wanted to move the Overton window, and we succeeded in doing it. And it's the same lessons. It's easy to feel frustrated and disempowered, but you know, you really can make a difference. So
I want to. I'm sorry if anyone is misinterpreted or didn't quite get what I'm saying. That's not my issue. My issue is, as a data scientist, looking at the data, I see no clarity. And there's a lot of us out there who are having the same problem. For years, we've been trying to figure out whether or not clouds are a positive forcing or a negative forcing. And the best we think clouds are probably a very mild positive forcing. But the data is so obscure that it's not there. We really there is still questions on the physics of climate science that we still have minor, you know, little trying to figure out what's going on. We've got it like down to 99%, but that last 1%, even if it's not that critical, is just hard to figure out, and the data is taking us nowhere.
I did want to say that there was a step decrease in or a step increase in Arctic temperature in 76, 77 that was associated with the Pacific climate shift. And there was a 1.1 to 3.1 degrees C increase in Alaskan wintertime temperatures. And we could see another step increase like that. So I'll share it to the space, but
Thank you.
there is science. There was a step increase. It was found by paleoclimate researchers. They looked at a 1,200-year composite ice core record of Aleutian low intense, and it was also associated. They were looking at intensification of the Aleutian low. So I'll get that to you, Saul. And yes, figuring out sort of what we do know is helpful. I find like the complex system approach of, finding these step changes is really helpful. So when there are slow changes in a system, you can have sudden shifts. And for me, this step, a step increase of 1.1 to 3.1 C of Alaskan wintertime temperatures is pretty large, but
Huge.
what we're seeing may be way larger than that. So, I think putting it in context and synthesizing the literature, clouds are the great unknown in climate science, but what you need to do and what climate scientists do is they tease out what is known and they focus on that. And this is one example.
Yeah, it's as I mentioned, we think it looks like they are a net positive, that they are a positive forcing. But it's also looking like it's not a significant positive forcing. And clouds are not really changing that much in either direction. So it just goes that it goes to show that it's probably not clouds, that the it is the cryosphere is looks like the primary change that we're seeing in the last 50 years. And as the data that I just got out today is showing, it is astonishing how rapidly it is plunged. The four, and when I say the four, I don't mean, there's been a step change the last 4 years in the Antarctic. Antarctic, and we're seeing it this week, Antarctic ice area and Antarctic ice extent have plummeted the last 4 years. Now, the funny thing is, Antarctic water temperatures and Antarctic temperatures, there's a difference, of course, water temperature and land temperatures, are not showing us that change. And it is possible, it is because the amount of energy that it takes to convert ice to water, that heat of fusion, could be why the Arctic temperature isn't increasing. It's literally kept at a stabilized state because it is melting ice instead of warming up the air and warming up the water.
I just shared, there is some research indicating that the Antarctic has undergone a regime shift in sea ice. It's not Rob Larter, who I am friends with on X, and he's leading the research on Thwaites Glacier, emphasized the uncertainty of, our Antarctic sea ice extent is wildly variable, but yes, there's starting to be studies shown that we've seen a regime shift. I just shared one, I'll put it in the comments.
In other news, apparently, I hope you don't mind me butting in here, Trump has announced that the tariffs that he was going to put on Mexico, the 25% tariffs on Canada and Mexico, has been delayed to April. He was, get this, no wait, I'm not finished. He was going to do April 1st, but I'm a little superstitious, so I made it April 2nd.
It is funny how okay, take a deep breath. a lot of the stuff that I do, I'm now talking about only on Blue Sky. I am not discussing this here on X. On my Blue Sky account, I have been going into more detail on the economics of what we are seeing. And I guess because this is, I doubt that they're going to look into it here. They're not going to transcribe the speech here. If you're a businessman, if you own a business, a company, it's very, very important for you to know what your costs are going to be down the line. No, let's say I'm building a widget that has a little bit of aluminum in it. It has a little bit of plastic in it. It has parts from China. It has parts from Canada. Maybe the drivetrain is in Mexico. So all these things I have to factor together. How much they're going to cost today, how much they're going to cost in 6 months. If I don't know what they're going to cost in 6 months, then I don't know how to plan for the future. I don't know whether or not I have to buy enough to make 6,000 or 600,000. So it handcuffs me as a business person. I used to work for, I worked in manufacturing for 35 years. And costing was a very, very important part, even though I was on the far end of it because I didn't control the pricing, but I was partially in charge of costing because when you're designing something, you have to know how you have to line up your vendors. You have to create the situations where if something goes wrong in your supply chain, and you can now buy it from somewhere else, which is I've discussed this many times before. That literally the first thing my boss told me, didn't tell me, he told all of us, is line up as many vendors as possible. Never use an item that you can only source from one company because you are at risk of losing your entire production line if one part fails. So if one vendor can't produce for that 1 week, you shut down your entire line. So if I'm an American businessman, and of course the same thing now goes for a Canadian businessman, and I don't know how much it's going to cost me next month to build my widgets because raw materials, I don't know how to plan for the future. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to become defensive. I'm not going to hire more people on my assembly line. I'm not going to buy more parts. I might not even build the new model that I want because I can't afford the retooling. So what all of this is doing, and it's not just the tariff, it's also the threat of the tariff. What all of this is doing, if I'm owning a business, is it's a gigantic red flag for me not to invest, not to take risk. And Trump, because Trump never in his life ever actually built anything, doesn't understand how manufacturing works. And you look across the board, his entire uh, cabinet, none of them have any practical experience in any of the fields that they are hired to do. They're all literally, it's like, he threw a dart at who are the worst possible people in all cabinet positions, and he got every single one of them. He 20 triple scored every single one of these idiots. So with these tariffs, what's going to happen obviously is there's going to be retrenchment. Even if there is no tariff, American companies are not going to be buying from Canadian vendors, or they're going to do the opposite. There's no tariff right now.
But
I'm going to buy twice as much
Sal,
aluminum this month.
I agree with that but in the short term, they can't really do anything, right? Because these are probably long-term contracts. They have to find new suppliers,
Yes,
build new relationships. So I totally agree with what you're saying. It creates economic instability. The other thing too is which I talked to you about was with the Canadian dollar being so low relative to the American dollar, it benefits the American companies that are buying the resources
yes,
or the labor costs or whatever it is. So that's a whole new reworking of the system because that's, I think
but
Canada.
it does
Oh, go
also
ahead.
help Canadian um, It hurts Canadian importers, which ironically
Yes. Oh,
hurts
absolutely.
American exporters. So what he's doing is he's actually making it harder for American companies to sell in Canada and making it easier for Canadian companies to sell in the United States. And that's a head scratcher. But again, if you understand business, when you hurt someone else's currency, what you're doing is you're helping them export.
And I mean, yes, 80% of Canadian trade is with America. So that would hurt us. Like they were, the Bank of Canada was, predicting if these tariffs went in within a year, we'd have like 9% inflation. We would have, down the road, massive layoffs as people started to shift production and stop buying things because they can't afford them anymore either.
Well, I again, at about an hour ago. Geez, Christ, the time. We're gonna shut down in 10 minutes, people. Sorry, Kim has to go. I have to go. I didn't even know how late it was. Time literally flies when you're having fun. What I'd mentioned a little over an hour ago was the United States has several ongoing metrics on future economics, and one of the most important ones is the Atlanta Fed GDP Now metric. The Atlanta Fed every few days updates the statistics for what it looks like the United States is going to do in the current and future quarters, actually. And for the first quarter, it now looks like we're in recession. So that should scare people that the United States could be in a recession. Well, it's only one quarter, so it's not a full blown recession, but we could be in a negative quarter, a negative GDP print, and that's and not just a negative print, but it looks like it could actually be a negative recession, a negative print on real, not inflation adjusted dollars. So it's that bad. If this goes on, and what's this going to do to? Well, the first thing it's going to do is people are going to be calling for Trump's head because I don't care how wild you are a Republican. If all of a sudden you can't make ends meet and you lose your job, you ain't going to vote for the guy in charge anymore, and you're not going to support his policies anymore. So, as the one thing I've always been saying is Trump's greatest limit is his inability to perform. So as yes, he's going to destroy the economy, but he's also going to end up hurting his ability to function. All right, Robert, and again, because
Oh wait,
By the
Sal.
way,
Oh,
Sal, by the way, everything you just said about a decreasing GDP was echoed in an article on CNBC this morning.
tell me it wasn't Kramer.
Yeah, thanks for that info.
No, it wasn't Kramer.
Good. Now I feel better about my as long as it's not Kramer, then I feel my analysis is correct.
Yeah, thanks. So, being brief, I know you've got to shut the space down in, what is it, 5 or 6 minutes, something like that, I think.
Yeah, about right.
Anyway, I just wanted to close with a few words in my own mind about publicly getting behind our scientists now, like never before. I was interacting with Professor Elliot Jacobson the other night on his ice sheet collapse post. And actually, I was very pleased to see that Professor Jacobson decided to follow me. So every scientist I have following me, I feel privileged to be able to converse with them, if you get my meaning. Because scientists being there for you is one of the most important and fundamental things that I think we can have around us in terms of truth. Yeah, I was delighted because I'm sure you all know that I have put out many Professor Catherine Hayhoe posts over the years I've worked on X, and actually Professor Hayhoe follows me on Blue Sky. And I do follow Professor Mann on there, who I actually champion Professor Mann, as I'm sure you all know from the sheer amount of support I've given Michael over the years, and indeed Peter Hotez as well, who is a genius in my opinion. I will also say that Dr. Paul Dorfman and Dr. Jill Bouch have been following me for a long time, and I have actually championed their posts as well, along with Dr. William J. Ripple, who I'm sure you all know here, and of course my good friend Peter Kalmus, who I've been following for a good number of years now. So anyway, very briefly, I just wanted to reiterate the point, please, and encourage all your people in all your communities to get behind scientists globally, no matter what it takes, in order to continue to push the message of the levels of collapse we are facing by the second every day. It's imperative we stand firm with our scientists. Don't abandon them just because governments tell you that they're not or no longer required or functional anymore. Bullshit. I will say that it's imperative we continue to stand with our scientists through this crisis in the US and indeed all crises in all countries across our planet. Anyway, I'll leave it for that for now, Sal. That's all I wanted to say. So thanks for the microphone and cheers again.
Oh, Sal, I just want to make an announcement. Thank you for that, Robert. That next week, we're going to be on Thursday, back to our Thursday time, and also that Monica Piccini is going to be coming and speaking with us for a part of it. And we're going to be discussing her article, Brazil's Biofuel Boom, Green Growth or Greenwashing. So that should be a really interesting discussion.
You know how I feel about biofuel.
I wanted to
Spoiler alert, it sucks.
say something real briefly. So Zach Labe was this amazing polar scientist on X, and he's been regularly posting really amazing graphs of trends in sea ice and Arctic and Antarctic temperatures. And he posted yesterday that after nearly 2 weeks of overwhelming uncertainty, today it happened. I was fired from my dream job of working at NOAA. I'm so sorry to everyone also affected. My job was to strengthen NOAA's use of machine learning and AI for subseasonal to decadal weather and climate prediction. And I immediately posted something supportive on it, but he got just dogpiled. He got 1.5K replies, and he got dogpiled by hate. And he said, and he left Twitter. You know, he's not going to be posting anymore. The end of I want to urge everybody to be conscious of that. And, you know, I'll try and share Dr. West, who were two doctors who are very active in spaces on X and in posting and advocating for sanity in responses to COVID and, you know, infectious disease risks, you know, measles vaccination.
Apply to you that I gave an actual F-bomb yesterday when I saw that he was fired. Are we dead?
It's very dire. Very dire.
We help them connect in ways and speak out. And we were kind of starting to scheme about that. But it's just
which means that the price is going to be much higher. The cost is going to be much higher, which means that unless these guys can have really amazing crops this year, they ain't making money. I know there's a request up. I'm sorry. We have to go. So Rich, we're gonna come back next time. I'm sorry. We have a firm 3 hour limit because last week we went to 4 hours and it was getting a little too difficult. And it's been our pleasure. We were joking about this. We're not going to call this our first anniversary show, but it kind of is. So happy New Year from us at the Climate and Ecology Workshop. And last requests, last goodbyes.
Thank you for all coming. It's great to have you here. I really appreciate it. I look forward to this every week. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks again,
And,
Kim. Thanks,
and we'll
Al.
catch you guys. Our pleasure. We'll catch you next week. Next week will be Thursday, probably 10:30. We'll see if we can go to maybe another half an hour longer. But it gets taxing because we all have schedules. Once again, thank you all for coming. Bye bye.